All right, well, welcome back to our very special Christmas series with great expectation. Finding hope, peace, joy, and love this Advent season, and Merry Christmas week. Because if you're listening on the day this episode is released, we're just a few days away from Christmas. And so, how appropriate that this episode is all about love. Living as and loving our neighbors, taking a simple path to a more deeply connected life. And this episode, we're inviting you to belong more fully and engage more deeply with this life we've been given. And so I'm so excited. I'm so excited about this conversation. But before we go there, I have to introduce you to our very special guest, Shannan Martin. Welcome, Shannan.
Hi, it's so good to be here.
Yes, it's so good. And Merry Christmas. And now I get to gush about you a little bit. For our listeners and viewers who don't know Shannan, Shannan is a mom, wife, and neighbor living in Goshen, Indiana. She is a voracious reader, a wannabe gardener, a news geek, a thrift store stalker, a justice fighter, and an aficionado of not too spicy salsa. That's awesome. Shannan is author of Start With Hello, The Ministry of Ordinary Places and Falling Free. She is a cook at a local nonprofit, The Window, dedicated to feeding her community, and falls asleep most nights thinking about breakfast. Love it. Welcome, Shannan.
Hi.
So, Shannan, what's your favorite meal to cook, would you say?
Oh, my goodness. Oh, I love that you're asking me about food.
Because I love food. I love food, so this is going to be...
I do, too. Mm-hmm. I do, too. I would say, I cook lunch. We cook a hot lunch at the window where I work. But my main jam is a dinner. It's a dinner vibe. That's when I'm feeding my family. Mm-hmm. Breakfast, everybody is kind of fending for themselves. Lunch can be sporadic. But dinner's where I kind of put my weight into it a little bit more.
Okay. And what would you say is the meal that you would most make if... Well, yeah, that would be your favorite meal that you would make.
Yeah, I'm not a chef or a trained culinary person. I am a home cook who likes to feed people. I like things to be kind of, I tend to be more of like a one pot type of person. Yeah. I'm not doing like a meat and side dishes and, all these things.
Right.
I'm doing a soup often, or I have two Asian sons. We eat a lot of Asian inspired situations, bowls, we eat a ton of rice. That's our main carb in this house. Okay. So
good.
Last night we did chicken tikka masala. I did that for the first time.
That's my favorite.
I tried it.
I love chicken tikka masala with my garlic naan bread. Yes.
Oh. It turned out better than I thought. I didn't know. It was something I was willing to try, and everybody liked it. So yeah, I like to experiment. I mean, I like to try new things, and yeah, I like to have fun with it.
It's interesting. I never liked to cook. I always thought, what a pain. It takes too much time. But actually, during the pandemic, it changed everything because I was forced to cook.
Right.
And then I realized, Shannan, that my creativity, there was something that came out of me when I was cooking, like this. Mm-hmm. There was a joy of cooking for my family. I had time. It was actually an excuse for people to get away from me.
Right.
To allow me to do my food
Give
prep,
me space.
my space. Yeah, and I actually started making, one of my favorites is pork adobo, which is a Filipino dish, or chicken adobo with rice and vegetables was one of my favorite. And then I also love to make this garlic chicken with green beans and rice. But we eat a lot of rice. I love rice. I mean, I like potatoes, but rice is kind of the staple.
Yes, same.
That's awesome. Okay.
Yep.
Next quick question, because I love that you are a thrift store stalker. Best thrift store find to date?
Oh, my goodness. Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm looking around. Most of the things in my house, most of them are thrifted.
Really?
Most things came to me somehow secondhand. Boy, best thrift store purchase to date. I'm going to say, because it's what I'm looking at right now, this might be a little bit of a cheat. It came to me secondhand, but I'm looking over my kitchen at a set of old lockers that were pulled out of a school that were set for, the school was being torn down, and I nabbed a set of these lockers, and I keep my cookbooks and my aprons, and it's, I have a kitchen that doesn't have a ton of storage, and so we're kind of working with what we have, and that's something that's it's a fixture in my home.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I would say for me, I got some great glasses, short glasses from France that my girlfriend and I found just actually last week behind other glasses,
Ooh.
and they were gorgeous. I can't even believe it. They were like $12 for 8 of them, and I'm like,
See.
"Are you kidding?" She's like, "These are amazing." That one, I have said some of my greatest records. My family were vinyl. We're a vinyl family. We love records. So we've gotten some really good classics. And then old frames. Some of the best frames I have in the house are from thrift stores.
Yep. Yeah, just pull I mean, a lot of times what's in it isn't even artwork. It's just maybe a cheap print or something. Pull that out and use that frame.
I know.
You're right. Yeah, that's it. And you kind of reminded me, probably my favorite thing to look for, like to consistently hunt for when I'm thrifting, is mugs. I have my second book, The Ministry of Ordinary Places, has a bunch of mugs. It's my mugs for my kitchen. And I am always looking for thrift store mugs. You can find such great ones.
I know.
There are 50 cents.
And baskets and like all kinds of things. And sometimes my husband's just like, okay, you need to give yourself. Right. And the problem is with the budget at the thrift store, he's like, and a budget doesn't make sense because for $20 you can find so much stuff.
It's just, right. I have to be careful that I don't. We have the best thrift store in Goshen. And I have to consciously not go too often. I mean, if I go, I'm going to bring something home. And we live in a pretty small home. I don't have room for a lot of stuff. I don't need a lot of stuff. So I have to be, like, at this point, I'm like, I try to only go maybe once a month. I have to, like, limit myself.
Yeah. But it's fun because also, like, in the next coming weeks, we have a friend's birthday, so it's kind of like a sort of in Christmas time, and he wanted a 70s theme. So wow, do thrift stores ever have some great 70s clothes?
That's super fun. I love it.
That's what's the fun, because I got the aviators, I got the bell bottoms and the crazy tops. Now I had to go to a Party City to get my Farrah Fawcett wig, but everything else was thrifted and from the thrift store, so it's so fun. Anyway, I love it. I love asking people because I love thrifting too. It's one of my favorites.
We have a lot in common.
I know, it's so fun. Well, before we talk about your latest book and just, this Start with Hello and other simple ways to live as neighbors, and because it's Christmas, have to ask you these 2 questions that we've been asking everybody in this Advent series for the series. So number 1, Shannan, your favorite moment in the Christmas story, out of all the moments, lead up, within, what would you say is like, that's the moment that I'm like, captures me in a way that is different, meaningful for you?
I love that question. And I feel like the answer to that question changes for me every year. I have done my own kind of re-examining and deep dive of the story because, as someone who grew up in church my whole life, it's a story that I felt like, well, I kind of get it. I know the story. Yeah. But then, you revisit it and different things emerge. And I think the thing that's capturing me right now is in the Gospel of Luke, in particular, we see references to Jesus's parents. And for me, that's just like, it just distills the story down to, these were ordinary people living their one ordinary, precious life. We think of Mary and Joseph, and we know that they were the parents of Jesus. But to just read casually, and then Jesus's parents took him to the temple, and Jesus's parents, it's so relatable to me as someone who's a parent. But even if we're not parents, we have parents. It's just like that idea of making it a little more kind of bringing the story closer to the ground for me in a way that is like, it's just so tangible, just the idea of what does that mean to be not just Mary, the mother of Jesus, but Jesus's parent. I don't know. That's the phrase that has kind of captured me this year.
Well, just think about that. We actually, my husband and I, we've got some great fun friends. A lot of them are former pastors, seekers, like all kinds of people. And we always want to humanize it because imagine knowing there's Jesus and you're trying to parent Jesus. So discipline, correcting, but then does he know what I'm going to say beforehand? And then will he know how to respond? Like we actually go through this when we hang out, over dinner parties about how those conversations would be. Or are you like, was there, were you conflicted? Were they conflicted as parents going, if I
I'm sure
say
they were.
this,
Aren't we all?
right, like,
You
well, we
know?
have to go to therapy because he has family origin issues. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Jesus, the Son of God. Like, I know that we say this, but fully human,
Yeah.
right? Like fully divine, and yet he was. I love that, parented.
Yes. Right. It's not just the means, it's not just the means of how did the incarnation happen? How did God come to earth? Well, through people, but it's like, oh yeah, they were a family
Yeah,
living normal family things and getting dinner on the table and doing chores and all the things that families do. That's what they were doing.
I
It's pretty
know.
cool to think about.
And imagine, like, we know brothers and siblings, like
Yeah.
how annoying could that be too?
Right.
Like, we talk about that too. Like, what is he throwing
Yeah.
at them? And did he ever
Yes.
do that? Like,
Right.
just so you know,
Right.
just a
We get it.
reminder.
We get it, Jesus.
Yeah, I am the savior of the world. Yeah, okay. You know what I mean? Like, just
I love it.
like, maybe he didn't say that, but when you're thinking, like, you're saying, the humanity of it, the
Yes.
family, it's
Yes.
real. Those are like,
Yeah.
that has to be legit in those kinds of conversations and interactions.
Yep.
I love that. Thank
Yep.
you for that reminder, because sometimes we make it so far away from us that it was such
Right.
yes, and it,
It's
you
such a
need,
special story, but it's
yes,
also such a human and ordinary story
yeah,
in so many
love it.
ways.
That might be your next book, of like the the story of Jesus growing up, or being a
Oh
parent
my
to
goodness.
Jesus.
Right. Oh no.
That was
I'm going to let somebody else try
okay.
that one.
Yeah. Could you imagine that? How that's going to be? Okay. We'll just put that, Shannon, in sort of like a possible box
Okay.
for you.
Okay. Okay.
Awesome. Okay. Next question. That was great. What are your thoughts, Shannon, about our anchor quote? I've been sharing this with everyone too for our Advent series, focusing on love. This is the quote from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And this is what he says: "The celebration of Advent is possible only to those who are troubled in soul, who know themselves to be poor and imperfect, and who look forward to something greater to come."
One of the things I think about is in the hymn, the line, "A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices."
Oh, I just got chills. Yeah.
And that's another thing I think about every year. It's usually a quote that I don't put up a lot of repeat. I really don't do this at all. Put up repeat content on Instagram. But I know when December rolls around, I will pull that out because it's such a reminder that without that weariness, we don't have the thrill of hope. Like it requires both. We have that weariness, and so we have that hope. And we can't hold hope in the same way without really relating in some way to that weariness, the weariness of the world. So yeah, that's what comes to mind for me.
That's good. I like that. And I love that song.
Yes.
I love that song. Some of the best theology I find are actually in Christmas carols,
Yeah.
just
It's kind of
introducing.
hiding there in plain sight.
Yeah.
It's like we sing the songs and then, you get to whatever age. I was well into my 30s and even 40s before I was like, oh, wait a minute. This is a hymn of justice,
Yeah.
whatever the case may be. Like there's some really powerful
Yeah.
theology.
And I feel like we should bring those throughout the year. Like, I remember
Right.
that in one of
Yes.
our church services, one of the worship leaders brought some Christmas songs because the theology was about, justice. We're talking about justice. And everybody was thrown by it. And I said,
Yeah.
songs like this aren't contained to
Yeah.
just Christmas. Some of these songs we should sing to remind ourselves
Yeah.
about why Jesus came and what he was doing, and redeeming the whole world and all of creation as we are to be partners with
Yeah.
him. You know what I mean? And so it's like, I think you're right. And I think that would be my next thing next year, is bringing Christmas songs,
Yes. I love that.
I love it too. That's awesome. All right. I want to talk about the book. And I think it's just incredible timing to talk about living as neighbors, loving our neighbors, especially in this season of Christmas. And not just Christmas, Shannon,
Yeah.
and throughout the year. But let's start first with why this book for you. Like, why was it so important that you're like, I'm going to write a book about how to live as neighbors
Right. Yeah.
and help people? And we'll talk about this afterwards, but like, help people, walk them through
Yeah.
very practical things that we can do.
My family moved into this neighborhood about 11 years ago. So, and that sounds in so many ways like a long time, but it was like a cataclysmic shift for my family. When we moved, we lived out in the country. We lived in a very homogenous community. And so we moved not far away, but into a very diverse and precious, overlooked in many ways neighborhood where suddenly we had a lot of people really close in proximity to us, a lot of difference in every sense of the word around us. And I was asking the question, what do I do? How do I do this? I had this understanding that, it matters to God that we know our neighbors and love our neighbors. I knew that in my head, but it's like, okay, how do we do that? And how do we do it well? How do we do it without, just this kind of savior mentality, especially, living in a lower income neighborhood. There's a lot of need around us. This is the book. Start with Hello is the book I wish somebody would have put into my hands, because I mostly write about the idea of neighbors and community. I believe with my whole heart that neighbor is part of my spiritual DNA. I think that is, as Christians, that is a primary part of our identity. And people we aren't taught in really practical terms. Why does it matter? What does it look like? And how do we do it? So in this particular book, I was answering the question, how do I do it? And what I can tell you is, I write using a lot of storytelling. That's always going to be a part of my writing. But I wanted this to be the most practical and accessible book I've written. I wanted it to be easy to read and easy to understand and give a lot of really tangible ideas on tell me what to do, just what do we do? How do we do it? And that's where I landed with this one is, I want it to be available and helpful to a variety of people in a variety of places, and really do the work of bringing us back together, or in a lot of cases bringing us together for the first time, because these are hard times. These are hard times in the world, and in our countries and our cities, it's just difficult, and we're divided in a lot of ways. And so, what does this really look like?
Yeah. I think that's really important, because I think maybe we can expand on that. I think the why is important, which is what you just said. And I think it's good is that in this, it's like you presented why and then how. Because I think a lot of people don't want to listen to the why.
Right.
Like, why should we live as neighbors, be intentional with our neighbors?
Yeah.
When they're
Why
so
do we
different,
have to...
we don't like them, we don't, you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
And
in so many ways, I was never taught this in words, but I grew up somehow absorbing the idea that difference was in some way dangerous. It's like with certain differences, we put that wall up, we put our guard up, we keep distance. And that just couldn't be less helpful. That did not serve me well in life. And so, if we think about what does it look like to live in the kingdom of God, and I like to think of it as in the neighborhood of God, and in the neighborhood of God's reign, it means that we need to be embracing differences. We need to be listening better. We need to be coming closer. That's what actually makes us safer, is coming near to the people around us, and not just our next door neighbors, although I think that matters, but just, anybody that we're kind of rubbing shoulders with throughout our ordinary and everyday lives. I mean, anyone we're encountering is a neighbor to us. You're a neighbor to me right now in this moment. And so it's like, but what now? What do we do, and how do we do this? Because I do think, for me, part of the why is that as a Christian person, I believe that we were created to know each other and to need each other. That's the why for me, is we were built for this, and we've gotten, our culture in a lot of ways has pulled us away from this, kind of interdependence and leaning on each other and needing each other. And if we can find our way back to that, we will find ourselves safer and more secure, and with this sense of real connection, we belong wherever we are. We belong here in this place.
Love it. Now you go through, and we're going to kind of go through quickly because I also want to make sure that people pick up the book because I think it's a really great tool. This is a great like family or small group conversation.
Yeah.
Like I was reading it for myself, but then I was like, I was yelling at Chris, my husband, Chris, here's one. And then he's like, oh my goodness. Like I was literally yelling across.
I love it.
You know, like it was so funny. I was like, this is a good thing. This is what we just did the other night or whatever, right?
Yes.
So but I like it's really practical. It's really accessible. Your language too is really awesome. Like it's very easy but I want to talk through just really quickly some very practical things. So some people are like, that could be really overwhelming. Like,
yeah.
I'm an introvert. I want to hunker down. I want to bring everybody in close. So you're telling me, Shannan, to do a couple things. They're like, But here we go. So I'll combine some. You have, let's start with hello. And then you also have like take walks. So if we're talking about actually like proximity.
Yeah.
We're talking literally in our neighborhood.
Yeah. Yep.
So start with hello and take walks. Mm-hmm. And it sounds so simple, but I think some people are like, oh my goodness, that's already too much.
Right. Yes. And honestly, what I would say, Melinda, is when you said, you know, for the people who are like, I'm an introvert, I want to hunker down. Me too. And I write about this, you know, I bring it up several times through the book because I think a lot of times as a fellow introvert, we can be like, okay, I'm out. Like this, you know, this idea of living as a neighbor, like I wasn't built that way. I'm not wired for that. So I get a pass here.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I've just learned, you know, and keep in mind, you know, I'm 11 years into this and anything I know, anything I have learned about living connected with the people near me, I have learned from my actual neighbors. Anything I know, I have learned from the people around me. So this all comes to me secondhand because we showed up and were just loved so well by the people around us in really normal ways. You know, this isn't about becoming best friends with everybody who lives around you and going on vacations together. This is about taking these tiny little steps that are so slow and feel so hidden. You know, this idea of taking walks, like what does that matter? Why does it matter to pay attention to the sky, which I also write about and really believe in? But I think when we can kind of train ourselves, and it takes some intention, we are used to looking at our phones and going from one task to the next, and you know, life is full, and I make no bones about that. My life is very full, and it's full with intention. But to be able to take intentional moments to say, I'm going to look up at the sky every day. I'm going to look down at the ground beneath my feet every day because I believe the goodness of God is in these places and is in creation. And if we can find that rhythm of just learning to pay attention to the world we're in, it does translate over time to paying better attention to the people around us.
Yeah.
As we pay attention to the people around us, it connects us, and pretty soon we find that we love them, and pretty soon we find that they love us back. And so this takes time. This isn't something that happens overnight. And so what I'm saying with Start With Hello is you don't have to pick up this book and like change everything about your life. This is about find one little thing. You know, just decide that when you're out in your community and in your wherever you happen to be throughout a given day, that you're just going to be more intentional about making eye contact and saying hi. That's a really small step, and you might do that for quite some time before it takes that turn and you find yourself kind of having a conversation with one of the people. You know, we have to give ourselves permission that this is supposed to be very slow work and that all of it counts.
That's awesome. I'm going to combine two. One's from like the beginning of the book, one's from the end, which I had to sit and think too, where you say part of living as neighbor is acknowledging our blind spots and engaging honest self-reflection, and also re-examining our long-held beliefs. Those are big ones. Like those are the ones. Those aren't like what you said. It's going to take time because you're having to kind of say, why do I think about that with that people group, or why do I feel all of a sudden very afraid when I see that person? Like why do I feel afraid? What is that? And that's some unlearning, like you say. But I think I love. So it's that blind spots, honest self-reflection, and then later on, you're like re-examining our long-held beliefs. On things.
That has been my crash course, you know, over the past 10 or 11 years is coming to understand it makes us so uncomfortable to admit, even just to ourselves, even just to say within myself, what you just shared, like, if I'm being honest with myself, I feel a guard come up, or, I feel a little afraid. We don't like what that might say about us. And so we just don't allow ourselves to even go there. But until we go there and acknowledge, like, oh, this is real, this is happening in my body. I wonder why. Where did that come from? For me, I know it came from, in part, the fact that I lived in spaces through most of my life where everybody around me sort of looked and lived and believed just as I did. And so, growing up in that sort of bubble, it didn't allow me the benefit of becoming more comfortable with people who looked or lived or believed differently than I do. And so it was a matter of acknowledging this is true, and I'm going to confront this, and I'm going to let myself be curious about it, and not even judge or condemn myself, but to say, what if I just got curious about this? What if I started to read different books? What if I started to listen to different voices on podcasts or media or whatever the case may be? What if I started listening to some different news sources? All these things that we can do. Social media is such a great tool. We have Wi-Fi and we have a library card, and those are great places to start with. For me, saying, I'm reading mostly white authors. Why is that? I'm going to intentionally, and I've been doing this for years now, I don't let myself read 2 white authors in a row. So I am a white author, there's I'm throwing no shade here, but I realized I was not getting a very full picture on different perspectives around me. And I wanted to break through that. Good. And so I had to just be very intentional and say, this is my new rule for myself. And I'm going to just start mixing it up. And I have learned so much. And so, yes, you're right. It feels like a bigger thing. It's more towards the end of the book, but at the same time, it's a simple step that everybody can take. Today can be your day one where you say, oh yeah, my husband, I had the conversation with him. He was reading mostly men. He was not reading very many female authors. And it was a blind spot for him when I kind of pointed it out in love. He was kind of like, oh yeah, you're right. It's like, until we really confront these things, they are blind spots. And so once we acknowledge them, then we got to do something.
I love that. I was just interviewed Karen Gonzalez.
Oh, yes.
And she was the one who, in her book, and we had a long talk about it, where she said to me, I sat there with all of these books, and nothing wrong with these people, but I realized that all the books that have formed my theology as a Latina were white men from North America.
Right. Yep.
She goes, and I had, like what you're saying, and actually I said this, and it's interesting, my husband and his friends have actually kind of made this decision and accountability that they will not, their next books are not white men North American. They were actually looking for women from Asia and men and women from Africa and all different places, because, again, as we look at scripture, sitting from different, ethnic experiences, ethnicity, culture, the scriptures are so different and come alive in different ways, in new ways.
That's right. Yeah, we have different, we all come from a different and unique social location, kind of. Our place forms us. And so if we're really only absorbing content, whatever the content may be, from people who live in a similar social location, we're just missing out on a lot. So it's just been a really, my encouragement to people is to not be afraid of this process, to let yourself be curious and excited about it. And it's just, it just kind of cracks things open in a different way that for me, I just can't go back. I don't want to go back.
So good, Shannan. I want to talk about this idea of home and house.
Yes.
The clean house, the open house, inviting people over for food, don't dread the drop by, which you say. And I was convicted because I'm the type of person where I like things kind of tidy.
Sure,
I like things kind of nice, so that when people come in, it's like they don't walk into a dirty bathroom, because that stuff drives me crazy. And I know. And I'm not outing people, but when I go to somebody's home and they know I'm coming, why is the bathroom dirty? Why do I see dirty clothes beside the toilet and the sink is still with mushy,
toothpaste globs?
And it drives me crazy. I'm like, but I was coming over for dinner. You could have just done a quick little Lysol wipe, right?
That's
anyway,
funny.
so I was reading that, and I talked to my husband, Chris, and I go, is that a block for me? Because I'm so like that, how do I find the balance? Because, and I think maybe let's just talk about that, because I think the home and having it accessible and open, for some people, that's just like, ugh.
Yeah.
Like the drop by is dreaded. Like you say, like, oh my gosh, I don't have food, I don't, blah, 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 blah. And then, which then can block us from neighborliness, from living as neighbors. So maybe you can talk about that, because I'd love to hear that, and I think a lot of people would, because how do we make our home open and kind of get past a little bit of our own issues,
Yeah, I think it's great, first of all, that you even asked your husband, like, is this a thing for me? Because I think that's part of the self-reflection. We all come from different places, and we all bring different baggage into this conversation. So for me, I feel like the Martha Stewarts of the world just did not. I'm a fan. I read decorating magazines. I was devastated when I got the notice that I was, that magazine was done. I like it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it hasn't done us any favors in terms of actual connection. It did well to teach us how to entertain and how to impress people, and how to enjoy hobbies and, learn new skills, all those things. But those, I think when we have this expectation of trying to present a different version of ourselves to other people than how we actually live, that does become a barrier. And I know that had become a barrier for me. We want authentic connection. We want, we say in churches and in our lives, like, just, come as you are. We welcome people just as they are. But then when somebody comes to our house, we're going to polish it up. Most of us are going to polish things up pretty quickly. And that might work that particular time, but the problem is now you've set the bar there, and so it's like you can get everything tip top shape, but now you got to do that every time, or like the facade is going to crumble.
Right.
So again, that's something that I have learned from people in my life, friends and neighbors in my life, who honestly, some of them come from really hard places. Some of them have suffered in ways that I will never suffer. And the ways that I have been welcomed into their homes is just like, we're just so glad you're here. It's not at all about what does the house look like, or what food do I have to serve you, or, I write about this and start with hello. I've been welcomed into homes where they don't have a table. There's no kitchen table. So all of these experiences have helped me understand the importance for me of knocking that bar down. To say it's an honor to be invited into somebody's home just as it is. And I can be, I'm looking around right now at the mess around me that you can't see from where you're sitting, but it makes me crazy. And I like to keep things tidy. And my husband, Corey, says all the time, Shannan, our house is messy because people live here.
That's what Chris says.
People live here.
Yeah, people live
so
here.
Why not? Why are we so afraid to let other people see? I think we are all living similarly. We are all dealing with our own kind of mess and our own level of mess, but we all think we are the only one, or, we don't want to be the one to go first and expose it. But what if we just did? What if we went first, and the next time somebody came over, we just, we didn't make apologies. We just welcomed people in, clear the clutter to one end of the table, pour a glass of water. That's all you really need.
It's so good. I'm sitting here going, okay. That was you need to tell me that.
Well, let me tell you, this might help you feel better too. I once had a friend, she's a good friend of mine. She's another author. I'll just say her name, Lisa Jo Baker, if you're listening. She came over, she doesn't live near me, but she was coming through town, and she came in and she said, can I take a tour of the house? Like, she's seen my house on Instagram and all these things. And I was like, oh my gosh, am I going to take her upstairs where my 2 teenage boys live?
Yeah.
And I took her up because I was like, okay, I'm practicing just letting, keeping that guard down. We went up into that bathroom, and this is gross. I'm just keeping it real. There was a dirty Band-Aid on the toilet seat. And we laugh about it to this day. Like, we laugh all the time when I talk to her, like, the dirty Band-Aid. Like, this is how so many of us are living. And it's just reality. It's reality with kids, with teenagers. And she saw it all, and I was embarrassed. But you know what? I mean, it honest to goodness brought us to a next level of closeness.
That's
In a
awesome.
way that honestly made her feel too like, oh, okay, what it does is it tells the other person, okay, you're not perfect. Maybe I don't have to be perfect either.
Yes.
And that's an extreme example, but it's stuck with me. I'll tell you
That's
that. It stuck
awesome.
with
The
me.
dirty Band-Aid. I'm gonna remember that. So even if I have something like dirty, like a little tissue that's dirty, I'll go, it's not as bad as
It's
Shannon's
not a
dirty
dirty band
Band-Aid.
on the toilet seat. Good grief.
It's
Gross.
amazing. Shannon, I love this conversation. And for, myself, the listener, viewer, in so much in your book, there's so much. I mean, navigating our differences, food and soup. We haven't talked. It's not thicker skin we need. It's a commitment to tenderness. From thoughts and prayers, I love this to more justice, which I knew would be so much in your book too. The actual movement and activism,
Yeah.
gardening and growing, which is hilarious because I'm a horrible gardener. I think I am. I've killed so many plants. Chris has bought me these amazing plants, and within 2 weeks they're like dead. So now I've got
Yeah.
those, and it's horrible. And I don't want to out myself, but I will. But I've got those like really authentic looking fake plants that
Yes,
really
that's
look real,
okay.
right? Because I honestly, I don't know what it is. Like I try to be tender with the leaves, and I talk to
It's so
them,
hard.
and it's and so Chris is just like, you know what, you got to be honest about you're just not good.
Yeah,
Like,
you're good at other
really-
things.
Yeah, other things. But I think at the end, this sense of this empathy and hope, I'm trying to encourage people in this time of love, like how to take the pause on, I think kind of like examining ourselves, but also this love and empathy and hope for our neighbors. And what does that mean? Because it's going to look different from where we are,
Yeah.
where we live, our neighbors, our neighborhood.
Yeah.
But just how do we choose it? I mean, you don't want to manipulate or force anybody, but I think just
Right.
for me, like I'm ready. I feel very ready. I invited my neighbors to my party, and it was great. We had, singing, and it was just so much fun. And it was really cool because my neighbor came over. She was new. She didn't really know me. She could not believe the friends I had. She couldn't even believe, too. She goes, are you all religious? Like, she actually said that. She goes, because you are so fun. And I can't believe that you guys talk about Melinda and her life with God and her relationship with Jesus. Because she was but you guys are cool. Like, I
Yeah.
had never been in a place of all of these faith people having
Yeah.
fun, partying, dancing, singing.
Yeah.
And so it was sort of like this really great, it just happened a couple months ago. And
I
now
love
we're
that.
friends. They invited us over for Diwali. And, we're going to invite them over for Christmas. But
Yes.
and it was an easy thing. But I know it's not an easy thing for people to really want it and go out there. So I think maybe
Yeah.
just what is it going to take? What maybe we need to do? I know your book helps with that, but maybe it's just some
Yeah.
final thoughts.
Well, and that's the final chapter of Start with Hello. I set it up. It's 10 chapters where each chapter is saying like listening over speaking, kind of flipping different paradigms on their heads. And that final chapter is empathy over everything.
Yes.
Because I think at the end of the day, that is really the goal. The goal is that we can take these little tiny steps, start today. Today is day one when we say, we're just going to make these tiny steps towards each other. We're going to make these tiny steps to look outward rather than just inward, to open the door rather than keeping the door closed. We're just going to make these tiny moves. And the goal is that we come to a place where, are we still, having differences between us? I hope so. Because like you said, like that's really where a lot of the fun and interesting moments of life come from. That's where we learn. That's where we grow. But yes, we want those differences to remain, but we also want to be able to see each other as fully made in the image of God, as fully human, as completely, we're only using dignifying language, and we are going to try to listen better so that we can see the world in some small way from a different perspective, because we have a lot to learn from doing that. And I think really the goal of empathy, or kind of the fruit of empathy, is hope. When we can become people of empathy, we start to believe that progress is possible, because that's a hard thing to hold on to right now. I think myself and many people around me have said, like, I don't think this is going to get better. It feels like things just keep getting worse. in terms of the ways we're relating with one another and kind of getting along or not getting along, when we can center ourselves in this place of empathy and really seeing each other as neighbors, with things to offer and things to receive, ask for what you need, offer what you can. That's the whole vision of living as neighbors, is that we get to give and receive. When we can kind of settle into that place over time, we start to believe that we can hold on to that hope, that things are getting better. You make one little neighborhood more connected, that actually does make the world more connected. The math checks out. If you're having your fun parties with your friends and making those connections, that makes the world a little bit stronger, a little more connected, a little more hopeful. So yeah, that's what we have to look forward to. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And it's 100% possible for every single one of us.
I love that. I want to end with the neighbor's blessing that you have to the book. And I'm going to say it, and then people are going to have to buy the book to get the blessing. But I love it because it says, may you go out into this bewildering world warmed by the fire of possibility. May you come to see walking shoes, soup spoons, minivans, and wrinkled hands as worthy tools for connection. And may your heart stay tender, love that, your hands stay open, and your door stay easy on its hinges. And may you find comfort in the moon, art in the clouds, and goodness in the faces around you. May you gather, listen, and hope relentlessly. And may you never give up on the living light of belonging right where you are. Grace and peace and gumption be with you. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful blessing. I actually want to... Do you have these printed? Because you should get these printed or something.
I do. And we didn't even plan this. I was just like 2 minutes before we hopped on this call taking a photo. It's available in the most beautiful print on my website. Okay. You can download it there, shannonmartin.com.
Okay, done.
One of my favorite artists, Lori Hatteen, created it for me, and it's so beautiful. So yes,
oh my goodness,
it's available.
The timing of this conversation.
I know,
because I read this, I'm like, oh, and I was thinking, should I like write it out myself and then put it up, or should I have my daughter, who's an artist, write it and then write Shannan Martin and send it to you? Like, I honestly, it's so beautiful, and what a gift as a blessing. Like, even if it was on a card.
Yes.
I would give to my... I don't know. I'm just... Anyway, ideas for you, but I love it. And I'm Shannan, thank you. I know I could talk to you for hours, but I think...
I know. I love this.
Yeah, just a peek into the book and all of the great things. And you know what I love, too? At the very end of each chapter, you have one simple way to live as neighbors. And so you actually give kind of this, like, takeaway how-to. Like, on page 115, you're like, make a pot of soup.
Yeah.
And then have people come over. And you just, I really love that.
Yeah.
It's really practical. And for somebody who needs kind of takeaways, it's really important. So like I said, I think it's great for family or like a small group or even like a women's group to kind of walk it through.
Yeah.
And then you have what I love, takeaways. Okay, everybody, here's the simple step we can try to do this week.
Yeah. Right. And I really wanted to keep them simple. The other thing I wanted to mention is there are 2 discussion guides available on the website as well. Okay. One is a faith-based discussion guide, and one, the book, I am a person of deep faith, but this isn't necessarily, it's a faith-informed book more than it's not like a devotional type of book.
Yeah.
But we created 2. So whether it's a church group that wants more of that faith content interwoven, or whether it's I want this to be a book that works, like I said, for not just for people of the Christian tradition. So there's a couple different options there available for download on my website.
Amazing. Thank you for that. This is really, really good. Thank you, Shannan. I love it. Everybody should go get it. And I'm going to go and download that blessing.
Yay.
It's really special. Well, Merry Christmas.
Good.
Any special plans for Christmas with your family?
Not too much. We mostly just like hang out here at home, and just we keep it very low key and just happy to be together.
Yeah.
Eat some great food. Yeah.
Too much food for us. We have I don't know what happened with pandemic, but I think all of our friends decided let's just do parties every night. So my poor introverted husband, we went on a date night last night, and he was like, okay, just need to be honest with you. There's a lot of parties. I just
That
need
is
to
so
know
funny.
which ones do I really need to go to?
Right.
Which ones can you go solo or bring a girlfriend?
Yes.
And I'm like, hun,
Yes.
that's actually a really great conversation to have.
It is.
I'm like extroverted and I'm like party because I'm like, oh my goodness, now it's party time. We can go out and do stuff for Christmas, because for the past 2 years, it wasn't, there was
Right.
some challenges. So anyway,
Yeah.
I was just like, okay, I'll do the party. So it's
I love thinking of you partying it up for
oh
the
yeah,
next
for
month.
sure. Well, Shannan, thank you again. Really appreciate you being with us. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
And to you, our listeners and viewers, Merry Christmas to you. And as you start with hello, be intentional, and read Shannan's book, know that you are seen, that you are heard, and you are deeply loved by God as you choose to live as neighbors and love your neighbor. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm here in my hometown of Burlington, Ontario, hanging out downtown in our village square. And as I walk these cobblestone streets, I realize that it has taken a village to ensure that See Hear Love's mission and vision is shared across Canada, around the world, that you are seen, heard, and deeply loved by God.
As a body of Christ, there is hope for us to grow and reconstruct together.
We couldn't do this work without you sharing life-changing stories of what Jesus is doing in people's lives, stories of hope and freedom and healing in areas that matter to me and to you.
I want to have the faith to believe that His plan is good, even when it's taking that detour that I don't really understand.
We have so much more to do and so many more people to reach with the life-changing message of Jesus. For a monthly donation of $25 or more, you can help us do just that. And we'll send you a special thank you gift of our favorite things. Go to seehearlove.com/give or call 1-800-265-3100 and join our See Hear Love Village today.